Well, it was pretty cut and dried at the end of the sprint race. Max Verstappen from the pole, led from start to finish, almost passed by Carlos Sainz on the first lap. Carlos and Charles Leclerc side by side going into turn 3, and it was Carlos that got the advantage because Charles ran a little bit wide, but Max very, very good in defence, as we've seen already this year, and managed to pull away as the two Ferrari drivers got involved in a little bit of a fracas between the two, which cost them a bit of time, possibly overheated the tyres. But let's talk about tyres, because it was a medium tyre race. Everybody of note starting on the medium tyre, no pit stops, of course. And if you want one really good reason why Max Verstappen looks so good today in the sprint race, it's because this morning on his fuel runs, his long fuel runs, the second one he'd done, he did one yesterday as well on the soft tyre. Today he just focused 100% on the medium, this of course being the tyre on which he was going to start this afternoon and probably will start the race tomorrow. Ferrari playing catch up, not having done any long runs on Friday, ran only the soft in FP2 this morning with their long runs. So who had the more homework behind them as the lights went out going into the sprint race? Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Now, why did Ferrari not do any long runs yesterday? Why did they find themselves a little bit behind the music going into the sprint race today? Well, it's because they did this thing of focusing on the pole, as they often do, more than Red Bull, and they were out there running 2 or 3 sets early on when Max just ran the one set. And then beyond that, you've got to assume that the Ferrari perhaps took a little bit more time to get into a sweet spot, with the floors being a little bit stiffer now and the FIA scrutiny is looking a little bit more in that area. It seems to have affected, or certainly for a while on Friday, affected Ferrari more than Red Bull, who just had the most perfect race car as it hit the road. As I said yesterday, Max didn't even go out for the first 20 minutes of practice on Friday morning. And there he was, brilliantly quick on the soft tyre on one lap, and then doing his long run in the afternoons. And so more points for Max Verstappen. Yeah, you know, he is looking like the world champion, isn't he? Let's talk a little bit about the fight between Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. I was kind of surprised, actually, how aggressive Charles was in defence, because you would imagine that in the sprint race, if Carlos, for whatever reason, has got a bit of a run on him, you would imagine that Charles would think, okay, let him pass, I'll get him the DRS zone. And there's 3 of them around this circuit in a couple of laps. And at one point going into turn 4, or maybe it's turn 5, the downhill right-hander, Carlos got a really good run on Charles in the DRS, and he's right alongside him going into that corner. And Charles just uses all the road as if he's not looking in his mirrors at all, and Sainz has to back right out of it. Now, the interesting point, and I've made this point before, is that if they had touched, in reality, the stewards would have given the penalty to Charles Leclerc, because you are allowed to pass on the outside these days, and you are allowed to expect the guy on the inside to give you room. But on this occasion, Carlos did absolutely the right thing from Ferrari's point of view and backed away. But how many times are you going to do that this year in similar situations? I thought Carlos was really good after the race, just saying, yeah, it was a fight, you know, we enjoyed it, but it did cost us a bit of time. But on the radio, in the heat of the moment, he said, I thought the fight and the race was supposed to be at the front, not between us two. And I think that kind of summed it up. And there were a little bit of icy looks between the two drivers when they got out of the cars in Parc Fermé after the race. So all I can say is, if Max Verstappen and Red Bull had a car that was as difficult, for example, as the Mercedes this year, and the World Championship quite clearly was going to be between the two Ferrari drivers, would they be able to control them? I mean, this was for P2, this was for the sprint race, admittedly. But at the moment, you've got to say everything I've been saying about Ferrari, where Carlos Sainz has the political initiative and Charles Leclerc, quite correctly, is feeling a little bit hard done by in a number of areas, not getting the slicks at Monaco, not getting the new tyres at Silverstone, and so on. Because of all that, it's no surprise to see Charles being absolutely rock hard now in defence, even if Carlos Sainz has a little bit more momentum and a little bit more speed. And so it's rather fatuous to say to somebody like Charles Leclerc, are you two drivers going to work together in the race tomorrow? Because obviously Charles Leclerc is only going to look at it from his point of view, and what he's thinking about is Carlos going to drive to help me, or is he not? Whereas Carlos Sainz will be thinking, well, if we work together, DRS zones here, maybe we can get a bit closer to the Red Bull. And that's what most of the Ferrari team will be thinking. Whereas Charles Leclerc, as I say, will be out there, his own man, doing his own thing, with specific reference to the singular, because, as I say, he doesn't really have many supporters within the Ferrari team, politically speaking. Anyway, Red Bull looked superb. Ferrari looked pretty good as well. P2, P3, long way ahead of the rest, who were headed by George Russell, who had a really lonely race, actually. P4 in the Mercedes. Didn't have to have too much damage repaired overnight. New gearbox, obviously, a couple of other bits as well, but the car was pretty good. So let's just have a look at what happened in FP2 in the morning untimed session. Bearing in mind they're preparing for the sprint race, but also the Grand Prix tomorrow. An interesting assortment of tyres. As I say, Ferrari only ran the soft tyre today in FP2, 8.6 on old softs, both drivers. Max Verstappen, 8.7 on mediums. I think that kind of sums everything up. Fernando Alonso, who in the sprint race today was well positioned on the grid to be able to do something quite fun, didn't make it off the start and was then retired after one lap, so we'll have to find out what relatively terminal mechanical drama afflicted the Alpine. Esteban Ocon did the same time, also on mediums. Sergio Perez 9.1. So, interesting to see how many people were on the mediums, particularly the Red Bull drivers. But George Russell was really quick on the hard tyre. He didn't run it for very long. He's the only guy out there that ran the hard tyre. But a 9.2 on the hard tyre said quite a lot about the Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, only got out for the last 15 minutes this morning because they had to build a completely new car for Lewis after his shunt yesterday around a new chassis, a new monocoque, what they call the survival cell. And that was a big operation, and they were building it all through FP2. When he eventually went out, he did a run on softs, a 9.3, and then did a few laps on the medium tyre. So, yeah, for Lewis, a very dispiriting day, really, because he's starting in the middle of the pack, as you can see, and it kind of went from bad to worse, because off the line, it was a kind of mini version of what we saw at Silverstone. This time Lewis is in the middle, as distinct from Pierre Gasly with George Russell there. And on this occasion, it was Pierre Gasly who was tagged by Lewis and did one of these enormous spin things in the air. But this time managed to keep it on the island and keep going, interestingly, in the AlphaTauri. But it didn't look good for a while. And of course, from Lewis's point of view, I just wonder how long it's going to be before he says, look, I've had enough of all these midfield first corners. It's just getting ridiculous. Anyway, he went through and eventually he finished 8th in the race, but he took a long time to get past Mick Schumacher's Haas. Really good driving by Mick in defence. He'd lost the DRS to Kevin Magnussen in front of him, but did really well with Lewis, who was clearly faster under braking in all the heavy braking areas. But it wasn't until lap 21 with lap 3 to go before Lewis eventually got past. At one point, Lewis got on the radio and said the car in front has gone off at least 4 times. I think what he was trying to say was he keeps going off the track and he shouldn't be allowed to do that to defend his position. What I found interesting was he called the guy in front or the car in front. Surely he knew that was Mick, because if anybody on the planet, when he was in F2 or GP2, always knew who all the other drivers were and what they were likely to do or not do, it was Lewis Hamilton. So I can't believe he didn't know it was Mick rather than Kevin Magnussen, but who knows? I mean, he didn't actually say Mick is doing this or Schumacher's doing this. It was just the car in front, which sounded a bit, well, I used the word quaint yesterday. I think it was quaint to hear that from Lewis today as well. Let's have a look at some of the other results from the sprint. So George Russell, a very good 4th. Sergio Perez catching him towards the end. He drove pretty well. He was everything he did yesterday in Q3 was thrown out the window and worked his way up to finish 5th. The Red Bull looked really quick in his hands as well. Esteban Ocon 6th, good drive by Ocon in the other Alpine. Then Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, very clean drive by him, P7. Lewis eventually got past Mick, as I say. And Valtteri Bottas was behind Lewis, kind of watching all this as well, finished 10th, ahead of the 2 McLarens, which do not seem to be having a very good weekend at all. Lando had all that braking problems yesterday, but didn't seem to be very quick in the race today either. Had Daniel behind him most of the time. And so it went on. Alex Albon got penalised, had a big incident with Sebastian Vettel going into the long left, and Vettel ended up in the boonies somewhere in but managed to get back into the race again. The other thing from FP2 this morning was just a comparison of the 2 runs of Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. They both put in a lot of laps, as you can see, but Charles only on the soft tyre, Max only on the medium tyre, and I'm pretty sure you're going to find they're going to be running the medium tyre off the grid tomorrow, as indeed they did in the sprint race today. So I think it's always fun to look at these just from the consistency of those 2 drivers. If you look at Max, first of all, 8.7, 9.0, 8.7, 9.0, 9.3, 9.6, 9.3, 10.0, 9.8, 10.1, 10.2. Just unbelievable consistency. Likewise with Charles Leclerc, 9.4, 8.6, 9.4, 9.5, 9.3, 9.6, 9.3, 10, 9.8, 10.1, 10.2. And then he came in and did on a new set, did a 9.8 right at the end as well. So Ferrari, you could argue, have done the homework, but they've done the homework on the soft tyre. Whether they're going to be doing something weird off the grid. We'll have to wait and see. Unlikely, I would think, but it's always possible that they might be thinking start on the soft and then 2 mediums, whereas Max looks like he's aiming for the medium. Although he did do a long run on the soft yesterday, he's aiming for a start on the medium with a switch probably to the hard around half distance. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. The sprint race was pretty nice to watch in a way. I mean, it was over really before it almost started. Despite the fact that they actually had a delayed start, they did an extra lap because Guanyu Zhou also stalled his Alfa, as well as Fernando Alonso in the Alpine. It looked a bit like the start of an F2 race, actually, with all these dramas going on with the cars, not being able to get them started or whatever. Reminds me a little bit of, I was on the grass verge in Hungary one year when Jenson Button was still in F1. He was driving the BAR, and he didn't move off with the formation lap. He was just stuck there on his own on the grid, and eventually got the thing moved away. And I think he was able to make up his position and start in the correct position. But I was talking to somebody afterwards, and I said, "What happened? On the start of the formation lap with Jenson?" He said, "Oh, he got on the radio, and he said he completely had a mental blank, completely forgot what he was supposed to be doing on the steering wheel. It was so complicated." I don't think that could happen these days, could it? Because they're so programmed into what they have to do. But it looked a little bit like that with Guanyu to me, just like, what do I do here? The car's stopped. Anyway, but the sprint race was quite fun because they do the medals afterwards. I wish they'd do the garlands. I mean, it's a shame, isn't it? The garlands were really good. I wish they'd continue with that. But one thing they did do was a lap of honour for the winner in one of those Red Bull radical type cars with Max helmet off waving to the crowd. I really missed those moments, and I thought that was wonderful to see. And it should be the top 3 really, I think, all sitting on an open car waving to the crowd as they used to. It's a really nice thing for the crowd. As it was, sitting in that radical thing, the Red Bull thing, he's sitting so low, it's actually quite difficult for anybody, all the fans, to see him. They knew he was there and he was waving away, but it would be nice if they were in, I don't know, Mark 1 Sprite or something. They're all at the back, they're just waving to the crowd, going around really slowly. But then what have Red Bull got to do with Mark 1 Sprites? No, that would never happen, of course. So there we are, relatively short vid, I think, because it was a relatively short race. All I can say is that the guy who got the pole is the guy who's going to be starting from position 1 for the Austrian Grand Prix tomorrow. 3 DRS zones, not many corners. Could be incredibly tight. It could be a little bit of a Max Verstappen walkover, assuming things go as they appear to be heading right now. We'll have a look then, see what happens. See you soon.